is any brand looking to enter any country, may it be South Korea, UK, or even America, there is a simple equation of price plus value must equal worth. So price is what you pay, value is what the consumer gets, and worth is what the consumer believes its price or value to be to them. And I think today, when you look at a brand from India going to the UK, for London, for example, with a brand we launched at Harrods from India, there is a stigma, there always has been, of made in India. But I think if brands are not happy and they're not patriotic and confident on the quality that we're providing, it's very difficult for any owner to position their brand. So you need to really look at the price, value, worth, plus you need to have a long-term objective, which is the same as any brand launching from the UK, Switzerland, in India.
Sure. So does that mean, as an additional question, that for a company which is trying international markets, they would look at a slightly different brand architecture, maybe a different brand or a sub-brand?
Not necessarily, but I think on the core value of the brand, definitely, it needs to be a very clean story. If you don't mind, I'll go into a little anecdote. So we had a brand which is originally from Russia. They have been making handbags for nearly 300 plus years. They made handbags for most of the royals around the world. But till date, the brand has never communicated. They don't have a website. They don't have a Facebook page, an Instagram page. But there is a 30-year waiting list. Not a man-made waiting list, such as Hermes. It's physically impossible for them to make that many bags because they don't have the craftsmen. Despite not communicating their brand values, or the architecture. And nothing has changed in the brand, despite the office in India, South Korea, even Brazil.
So it is the value and the quality that takes precedence.
Absolutely. Craftsmanship over profit.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I think, a point well put. Now talking about global, I think in general, what we are seeing right now is increasing trend toward protectionism, non-tariff barriers, and some people are even talking about trade wars. How does that act as an impediment or showstopper in that some sense for companies which are trying to look on both sides of the border? So what has been your experience of these macroeconomic factors on the kind of brands you wanted to bring to India?
So I'm talking of the era pre-GST. When we started business, the import duties for any products coming into India was as high as 50+%. This I'm talking about 14, 15 years ago. And today with GST, that has come down to a significant amount, come down by a significant amount. But yet the Indian consumer refuses to pay attention to any such barrier that exists. He can't be bothered if you're paying customs duty or import duty or excise or VAT for that matter before GST. He wants a product. He wants the value of the product to be the same when probably he goes to Singapore or Dubai or wherever he wants to go. So what I'm trying to say is that entrepreneurs, brands have to live with this if they can't change it. If you can change it, go ahead. But if you can't change it, you got to know the pitch on which you're playing, and you can't complain about a bouncer. That's all I would like to say.
I definitely agree with you, but I think, there also comes a point where each country must protect its markets, and economically, politicians, I know we're not supposed to talk about politicians, but they must protect the economic welfare of the country. Today, India's trade deficit is incredibly high. The US, I believe their sanctions are, let's be outspoken, immature. But at the same time, India does not offer any incentive to any of the countries. May it be Swiss watches or pens. We don't see a special economic zone. We don't see a relief in duties. So trade barriers are going to occur. And I think we expect them to occur until there's not a better balance between the countries economically.
So I like the analogy that you gave, that it's a pitch that has been given to you, you have to play. and be prepared for occasional bouncers that come your way. So that's a good one. So I think if I was to change tracks and now look at innovation and product, a brand positioning is one thing which we discussed, but from a product portfolio perspective, now that could be in one category like yours, Nikhil, or this could be wide category or wide spectrum as you handle, Rahul. How do you modulate the product and innovation strategy given the markets where you operate? Would be interesting to take your thoughts on that.
What we have done over the years, and I can quote by some examples. So we, like I mentioned, we bring in brands and we distribute them through our retail stores, through third-party retail stores in India. What we have successfully done over the years is to combine products and create value offerings for consumers. And that's gone down very well. So, with a writing instrument, with a pen, you add, let's say, an accessory. Could be a table clock, could be a business card holder, could be a wallet, right? And the consumer, for a price, gets a gift set which combines 1, 2, 3 things. He sees this far more favorably than just a writing instrument. He goes online, he checks the price in Dubai or in Singapore. He finds that the price of the pen is, let's say, $25 or $100. And for the same price, he gets a lot more in India. He's delighted. Right? So that's what I would say is an example of how you could add on, make it India relevant, like we just started by saying, make it a lot more value for the money that he's paying. So that's just one example.
So I think at the end of the day, when you've obviously got the value proposition, which we've spoken about, but at the same time, each country has a very definitive style of consumer. Today, the ultra-high net worth in India is not similar in taste to the ultra-high net worth in London or Moscow. In each country, we have a completely different offering. Our customer service levels are very different, and our style of education and the tact we take to educate the consumer is very different. Prime example, in India, when we launched, 2011, we launched with Cecile Purnell, Tourbillon watches. They make around 75 watches a year, starting at 1.2 CR plus. In Russia, we launched with a brand called Christophe Claret, which starts at 5.5 CR, and he makes 20 watches a year. We sell cars in Russia, we don't sell cars in India. So I think it's about the market maturity, the preference, and also being practical. So in India, our portfolio consists just about 360 of any of our customers' lifestyles, from suits to shoes to sunglasses, watches, leather accessories. While we don't do sales, we do not discount. We lose a fair share of clientele because we don't discount. But the clientele we do get have an immense respect and value for the fact that you cannot get the product cheap in another country, and it's not more expensive in India.
But doesn't that add a complexity in managing such a wide product portfolio?
It does, and I think that's where I'm blessed. We're 3 co-founders, so I'm the eldest of 3 siblings. And because we're young and dynamic, we've managed to bring together a team of 200 plus staff across the world. Now, when I say staff, they're not staff as we see in India. Each member of our fraternity and company is a shareholder. India is the only place we pay a small salary a month to maintain, and everybody then gets a dividend. In the UK, everybody's a shareholder, so the AGM is 200 plus people. So my staff manage each and every complication. We have 200 brains to pick, and the ideas are immense. And when you've got a fantastic, strong team, complexities, well, they're like having breakfast. And it's never a complexity itself.
Yeah, I think that works very well to have a team like that. But if we're talking about modulating this product portfolio for, let's say, India, on the other hand, Nikhil, so you mentioned about aggregation, value pricing, and all of that. I'm sure you will always have interesting discussions with the brand owners on that. So if you can throw some lights on how do you manage that kind of a conflict? On one hand, you're looking at market share, you're looking at growth, and on the other hand, the brand owner might have a slightly different view to things. So how do you manage the perceived conflict? I'm not sure if it is actually there, but how do you manage that?
So this is always a tug of war. There's always going to be push and pull, and what I've seen is through this push and pull, the best comes out, right? Obviously, at the end of the day, you want to increase revenues and sales. The brand wants to keep its brand ethos intact. So what we have learned over the years is that you've got to play this fine balance by understanding what the brand wants to communicate, where the brand comes from, how the brand is perceived, and we are able to put together an offering without losing the core value or the essence of the brand, right? So for example, with a writing instrument, as long as the bundling is an accessory which is seen as a supporting actor, okay, the brand is fine, right? As long as the accessory doesn't take precedence over the hero product, right, you're fine, right? So these are the things that you want to keep in mind. Packaging plays a very important role. We have found that, in the West, packaging doesn't play an as important role because many of the products that are sold are not gifted in their markets. But in India, people pay a lot of attention to packaging. Just by changing the packaging, make it India specific, India relevant, having packaging made in India for many of the brands that we work with has changed the fortune of the brand itself. So again, over here, the brand doesn't, only welcomes this change because it's only improving the brand image. Here's just another example of how we made it India relevant.
Yeah. So I'm just going to pick up on one thought over there, how to make that brand India relevant, or for that matter, the host country relevant. But for any brand who's trying to enter a new market, more often than not, you will see a fairly crowded marketplace where you're fighting for the share of voice and impressions. What's the right way to actually enter a new market?
Don't show you have money. Today we see a lot of Indian brands go out to New York, to most kind of cities, and especially in the luxury space. Brand owners seem to have this conception or misconception that if you go out showing you've got cash in the bank, you're creating lots of new fantastic products, places like Harrods want to stock you. No, they'll just want to charge you. But in addition to that, on a more serious note, I think it's key to understand that while gifting may not be key in the market, or the customer and consumer may be different, the mindset of us and psychology as humans remains worldwide, where anything we're buying, it must justify the price again. And additionally, you have to be sure of the TA you're marketing towards. Globally, the ideal factor would be to create a network of customers worldwide. A prime example would be our shoe brand. So we only make 1,000 shoes a year. Each shoe is designed to desire, which means the customer creates their own shoe, designs them themselves on our online portal. But when we launched in Russia, customers said, hold on, I'm not going to go to the effort of designing my shoe. I said, okay, don't buy it. We saw a 109% increase in 2 weeks of my statement publicly. So you've got to understand the mindset, and you've got to stick to your guns. You have to be confident enough to say, my brand is far more than the money you're willing to pay for it. The creations I create are far better. And last but not least, staffing. We have to focus on the right skill sets. And it's always best to take staff from a local territory and train them up to reach and groom through your hierarchy.
Sure. So the same question from an India market perspective. What does that mean from a marketing strategy perspective in India for a global brand?
I think Indians want to understand intimately where this brand is from. They want to hear the story of the brand. And I think as a partner for a whole lot of brands, we have tried to bring in this story to the consumer, to let the consumer know what the story is. For example, we distribute a brand called Caran d'Ache. They are from Switzerland. And they bring to the writing instrument brand the same craftsmanship that Swiss people bring to watches, right? So as soon as you say Swiss watchmaking, the same attention to detail, craftsmanship that goes into writing instruments, there is an aha moment by the Indian consumer. So this is just an example of how you need to communicate what the brand stands for to the Indian consumer for him to accept, understand, and then decide whether he wants to buy or not buy.
So do you want to share any customer behavior insight with the group here?
In what context?
In terms of the way Indian consumer approaches things, or what has been your experience while you went on to the journey to establish this?
Sure. So, Indian consumers are certainly brand conscious. They have heard a few things about the brand. They're not very sure, yet they want to buy. Early on, we always used to have consumers walking into our store. They wanted to buy a Mont Blanc pen, right? But they would never quite imagine what the price of the Mont Blanc pen was, right? So when they heard that it was 25,000 or whatever it is, they would be surprised, but they wouldn't show their surprise. I recall a customer walked in and said he wanted a Mont Blanc pen. So we said, this is how much it costs. So he said, okay, can you just sell me the cap? Because I just want to have the cap in my pocket, so that he could show his friends that he was an owner of a Mont Blanc pen. So just on the lighter side. But yeah, Indians are very brand conscious. With increasing spending power, they're becoming aspirational. But yet they want to buy into brands that they connect with. And of course, as long as they're getting a good value for what they're paying for.
Yeah, sure. Rahul, any customer stories from your end?
I have to be careful. I don't get shot when I get home tonight. Okay, so I think when I first came to India, 2012, we launched Cecile Purnell 2011 in India, and as my first visit. So we came down. We got a call from a client who spoke Shuddh Hindi, and said, I'm looking for a Cecile Purnell. I said, okay. Which one do you want? Oh, I want a 2 billion. And for a second didn't click. 2 billion, 2 billion. Actually, he meant tourbillon. So he came down to see me. He came in a Maruti 800. And at that time, I was not very aware of, Kanjivaram and all the sorts of Indian ethnic wear and the quality. So he came in very simple, white kurta, white dhoti, a walking stick, walked in and said, I want to see your watch collection. So we were lucky we had a few pieces in stock, not been sold yet. Saw the pieces, he said, okay, I'll buy it. I'm not going to go into the price of the piece out of the respect for the client, but it was more than a house, definitely in Safdarjung. He paid, went away. I called him, I said, why buy this watch if you don't wear anything? He says, for my grandchildren, because my grandchildren are spoilt. They love brands, and I'm trying to get them off this brand called Hublot. I said, okay. What don't you like about Hublot? He says, मेरा हलवाई Hublot पहनता है, मैं पोता पोती क्यों पहने?
Okay, so that's interesting. That's quite insightful. See, I also wanted to maybe take another view from you. So while we have been going through the success stories of brands coming into India or vice versa, have there been any areas where you thought maybe we should have done differently? Are there any pitfalls on this journey that you want to share?
I think we've made a lot of mistakes, no doubt. We've made a lot of mistakes over the years in different countries. In India, I think our prime initial haste to judgment was that it would be far easier to educate customers in India. The sheer geographical size is immense. And then you have the different dialects, you have the different cultural aspects. You have family pressures. So as of 2016, we have a more affordable niche luxury brand. We have 2 niche luxury brands, watches. We now have accessories like pocket squares. It financially cost us when we initially hasted. But with that, we've also had failures in investment. We've invested in Swiss brands, ultra high-end watch brands, and the investments have tanked 7 figures Swiss francs, purely because a lack of readiness of the market in some cases. In other cases, a pure misjudgment on the haste of R&D and the cost of R&D. And India's seen a lot of brands exit over the past 36 months and change partners.
Yeah, that's true. And some of the very well-known names as well. Yeah.
So in our own case, we have seen many brands that, like Rahul just mentioned, who have come in, who have not succeeded and have had to exit. But I think there is, in cut to today, I think there is a big advantage that brands have, and that is possible through digital marketing, right? Today, brands are making an entry into offline stores after they see the response to their online communication. And that's a huge advantage today compared to what it was earlier. I'm talking from the consumer, in the consumer space. So I know very many brands internationally who have done well through their dipstick surveys, their e-com sales within India, and hence decided to come into India and be present offline, in the offline channels. So, so having seen what has happened in the past, wherein brands who have come in and tried to replicate their international formula over here and have not succeeded, they are now trying this other route, and I see early signs of success.
And do you think that this entire digital or omni-channel...
And it's changing the rules of the game, right? Yeah, the simple answer is yes.
What about, in your case, Rahul, from a super premium or premium luxury segment?
It definitely will lead to a fundamental foundation change in the consumer response, but overall, no one can replace, well, not yet, despite augmented reality and virtual reality, the touch, the feel, the actual vision, the experience of visiting a factory, whether they make watches or shoes or pens or a suit. We've seen a lot of clients who have brought products online from various stockists, which we had. And the end resulted, despite paying the exact same price which we offer our product at, I've had chats with some of them, and they've said, you know what, I made a mistake. I said, why? Well, I bought this product, but it just doesn't feel the same. And I said, why is it different? He says, I don't know, there's just that fun, that excitement, that adrenaline, the joy of opening up a box and sitting with someone and having a chit-chat and a gossip and understanding where the thread is coming from or where the nib is being made. It's not there. So definitely, as a business, we'll be able to reach far larger geographical span. We'll definitely have a larger influence, and we will be able to entice further customers. But the core sales, especially for us, are always going to remain brick and mortar.
Yeah, so
I have another interesting point to make over here. Just as much as I'm saying that digital means of communication, commerce is going to change the world, we are in a category that is completely the other end of the spectrum, which is analog. So what I'm trying to say is that, just as much as people want, phones to communicate, laptops to communicate, you need that book and pen and paper to actually have something in your hand, and that gives you a lot of pleasure. So, while businesses are going to go digital, analog products like pens and accessories and notebooks are here to stay and will coexist with everything digital. So that's the business that we are in. So I thought I should make that point.
That's interesting. So analog products being sold on digital medium.
Absolutely.
So I think you brought up a very valid point, something I neglected. Smartwatches are big today, but we've seen clientele simply come and say, I bought this iWatch, it's great, but I'm not wearing it to a function or a wedding. I say, why? Because it's a smartwatch. I want to wear a Montblanc, Cecile Pernell, Goss, any of the craftsmanship, handmade watches which are mechanical, which have a heartbeat. Maybe I'm old school. I don't think computers have a heartbeat, but I think a pen and a paper definitely is a heartbeat.
Yeah. It's about those social indicators that you want to sort of radiate.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, which sort of brings me to a point that when you're looking at entering a new market, the channel mix that you're deciding, will have to resonate with what your brand stands for. So, like the example that you gave about some of the consumer electronics players, for example, which came to India on back of their strong digital and omni-channel play, and then expanded in after they tasted success. That's also a good strategy. And the other side of spectrum, which is to say that for certain segments, it will actually be advisable not to go that route and go into more touch and feel and experiential route to give that differentiation to the customer. So I think that's a very important insight which came out of the discussion. Now, talking about getting into the market, many of the companies get into joint ventures or strategic partnerships or collaborations and so on to get into the new market. How has been your experience in that regard, working with another partner in whatever capacity? Or you have been that partner in some sense?
Go ahead.
I think we're a little bit off the edge, I think, because we started off as an investment house. We started investing in niche luxury brands for a number of reasons, from protecting them from the big boys like Louis Vuitton or Hennessy, to helping them maintain their exclusivity and craftsmanship while increasing their reach across the world. But today, sitting here, we have always opted for more of a distribution and joint venture route. We've not ever made a distinguishment between joint venture and distribution. So I think earlier when you referred towards the arguments and the tussle between brands and brand owners. So, we've made it very clear to most of the brands, any country we go into, if we're entering a brand, we're investing. Right? You want to have control? Take control. But then put your money where it goes. Because if we're investing, or for example, Nikhil's investing in launching pens in India, it's a huge investment. So we always have to look at things such as, is the joint venture going to be mutually beneficial, number one, and the shareholding? Is a joint venture even worthwhile? Is it not better not to take a license and pay royalty fees and just sign a contract, represent the brand exclusively, commit to some sales, you miss the sales, maybe you pay a bit of penalty to the brand. But luckily, I think we've been pretty cheeky. We have missed some targets. We've never actually paid. So I think we've been pretty blessed with that.
Or you negotiated well?
Yeah, I think my sister negotiated well. She's she's what we call the pocket rocket in the office. But yeah, we did one. I think also we're one of the few do what we do. We don't bring mass brands. We're not working with promising hundreds of stores across every mall. We're very selective what we do. So at the end of the day, we're hitting a target, and we're helping brands feel good about what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Because we're bringing a very strong social aspect, which we may discuss later, into each brand's DNA.
Yeah, and I think that experience counts a lot because you're now working with somebody who has done that 20 times over, right?
Perhaps, though it always feels like the first time.
Yeah. What would be your thoughts on this when you're working with your global partners on this one?
So it is definitely a meeting of the minds. What the brand brings to the table, what you bring to the table, there has to be some synergy. If it's one-sided, it will not work for long. In our own example, we have worked with various brands. There was a brand that we started distributing called Lapis Bard. And over a period of time, we realized that the owners were not able to do much for the brand. And so we acquired that brand, right? And it would not have been possible if we did not, at the end of the day, look at the benefit of the brand and we looked at our own interests. So just another example, but I think ultimately it's almost like a marriage, right? It has the pleasures and the pains of a marriage, and you got to choose your bride carefully.
Yeah, and then you're logged in. Talking of brands, I was just wanting to take your thoughts. What are those brands that you really admire who have done really well in terms of being successful outside their home countries? So are there any brands, international or Indian, that come to your mind, and why?
I think for me, it's Zara that comes to mind, especially because they have done so phenomenally well outside their home country in such a short period of time. Another brand is H&M, and these two brands stand out when it comes to international brands. Indian brands, I can't think of many in the consumer space, although there are various brands who have done well in the auto sector, in the infrastructure sector, in probably other sectors. Yeah, but I think that also brings us to a point where there's an opportunity for Indian brands to go global.
There are a lot of brands that have done well. Patanjali, for example, may not be the perfect thing from a luxury industry veteran, but Patanjali is the third fastest growing international FMCG brand in the UK today. Then you have the likes of Petrovita, which I mentioned before, a Russian handbag brand, 30-year waiting list, 100% handmade. I think Indian fashion brands, with all respect, they've done very well to carry the Indian flag. But personally, as a consumer, perhaps, or a potential consumer, I feel where craftsmanship exists, it's not well communicated. And where there is no craftsmanship, it's over communicated. So if you're buying something, any Indian brand, you buy it because of quality. I know we discussed earlier about Jaguar Land Rover. Fact is, today it's an Indian brand as far as I'm concerned, because Ford ruined it, then General Motors ruined it before they transferred it over to Ford as a derivative. Today, Tata have taken JLR, they've given a sense of quality, they've set a benchmark, and actually it's very Indian. I know people may not understand that, but you look at the color palette, you look at the way the management is run. They've not fired anybody. Yes, they announced they're going to relieve 1,000 contractors, but they've already offered them positions in other Tata enterprises.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you've got Mahindra, Pininfarina.
Yeah.
Right? Again, they've done well. They've acquired a brand, and they've added a lot of Indian experience to the brand. Management, I think, is one of the key areas where Indians can excel, and we are excelling today. But it's a long ride, as it is everybody.
Absolutely. I think there's one point I will want to pick up from there, which is the management style. On the overall org structure and the kind of talent that you can hire, it will be very different across various countries. So how has been your experience managing the management style, the kind of talent that you had in various countries, all under one umbrella?
Maybe Rahul can take that question.
I think we're both weekly experience from a different side. But like I said, see, we have always opted for a equity-driven model. So for us, management, quite frankly, has never been a major concern or an issue. A simple example, we have a janitor in the UK, in a London office in Mayfair. He's been with me now since 2009. I couldn't even afford to pay his salary when he came to me with his salary, thinks I need this much. And I said, okay, but we take an equity. 4 months ago, a sales guy of mine decided to go on a rampage and meet all sorts of clients, more different backgrounds, and try and push for sales. Called me up and said, listen, mate, we got an issue. I said, what's the issue? This guy is taking the and he's going to lose me my equity. I'm not going to make enough money this year because of him. He's going to ruin clientele. So our management structure is unique. Each one of our employees, each one of our staff, each one of our partners, each one of our stakeholders is a CEO in their own right, in some form. In India, it's been different because the financial backgrounds, the growth of the market is far more rapid. People do need a monthly stipend here. So we've got a small stipend. But again, we're developing and we're training individuals from different backgrounds to take on the exact same level of responsibility and accountability compared to any of our other offices. And I hope to eventually start cross-pollinating staff so they can learn from each other from different countries.
I have nothing to add.
Sure. Maybe just to summarize, wanted to ask you if you were to advise, respectively, a company going global or a company coming to India, 3 things they should focus on. What would that be, respectively?
So I think if it was one thing and I repeat 3 times, it's value, value, value. But I'll not take that easy route. But I think it's important to understand and recognize the fact that India is very different from many other parts of the world or all other parts of the world. We are often compared to China. I think we're very different from China. Our Indian consumer is different from other countries. That's the first thing to recognize. As soon as you recognize that, you then pay more attention to what he or she wants and what he or she values. Number one. Number two, I think, like I mentioned before, it's possible to understand the market by coming through the digital route before you make investments in the offline route, right? And finally, you've got to work with someone who's able to work on the long term, right? India is not going to be easy to crack in the short term, especially if you have a long-term plan, right? So either you invest into a relationship with an Indian partner or invest into an Indian team who's competent enough to take your brand and work with it for the long term.
Yeah.
So I think primarily, let's be frank here. Number one, focus on your brand. And I'm referring directly to luxury companies, startups or otherwise. Focus on your brand ethic, and you have to be able to breathe and live your brand ethic. If you're selling a pair of shoes and you're saying, oh, you know what, I sell these shoes, they are XYZ, but then you're going down to Zara and buying a pair of shoes, stop working. Shut your company, go get a job. It's not going to work, especially in the international markets. Number two, avoid investment. Organically make a profit, grow it organically, and then for expansion, bring on perhaps an investment partner. Number three, don't just rely on consultants to give you advice and to give you an idea of the market terrain. Go meet other people from your fraternity, from your sector, from perhaps the product set that you're working on. Have a discussion with them. Get a true, real picture. And there's no point mincing your words. Be direct. Once you have those 3 acts in place, it's not difficult to steer the terrain of any country, I think. And that's something we have worked with in India, and we've worked in South Korea, and it's worked for us.
Sure. Perfect. So, yeah, on the last point, I will say, do work with consultants.
I was waiting for you to interject.
Well, I think that was very well put, and I couldn't have summarized that any better. In interest of time, let me request the audience if they have any questions, and we can pose them to the right panelists. I'm sorry, I can't see that well from here.
Can
so
you
if
see
you
me?
have any questions.
Hello?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so you mentioned, various brands, various locations. You have a lot of...
I'm sorry, we can't...
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, this is better. Thank you.
Perfect. So you mentioned various brands, various locations, a lot of staff. You have multiple products. I'm just curious as to, you can't do classroom sessions or one-on-ones. I'm curious as to what kind of technology are you using right now to ensure that quality is maintained?
Sure. So what is the technology that you're using right now to ensure quality is maintained? So what's your technology backbone? If I replayed that question well enough.
Yeah, thank you.
So technology in what sense? Is it, I'm sorry, technology in what sense?
Is it manufacturing technology or
No,
the enabling
in
technology
terms of a
backbone as in the IT?
platform or, something automated to ensure, everyone's in the same messaging that you require.
Manufacturing operations.
Okay, so as a company, we run on SAP for our ERP, so we have that as our backbone. Then we have various little points of sale related softwares. We work with a host of other small little apps for the digital marketing front, and we try to...
Rahul?
So, our greatest technology are actually our partners and individuals that we work with. From a back end, we have a custom in-house developed ERP. Digitally, we have a fantastic digital agency. Number 8, which I think points you raised, our account managers and our staff are the best because no one at least none of our customers, openly writes, I came to your shop, but the coffee was only 93 degrees Celsius instead of being 81. But face-to-face interaction gets us that feedback.
Thank you. Any other queries from the audience? Yeah, we have a hand going up over there.
Hi guys. My question is to all of you. What do you look for in a brand when you have to, partner with them or acquire them? What kind of qualities do you think a brand should have to be able to, to partner with or acquire?
For me, it's about authenticity, right? What the brand stands for, and if they have done well in their home market or in some other markets, and why they have done well, and how authentic they are to their story. That for me is extremely essential, right? I just mentioned a brand called Karan Dash, right? Another great example is Moleskine, is another brand of notebooks. And if you go back and see their story, you find that they're extremely authentic, and the way they tell their story is authentic. That's what resonates well to the modern consumer, no matter what the price is. So that's something that I certainly look for when we are looking at tying up with a brand.
So I think from our perspective, the immediate factor is that we have to get along as 2 people or 3 people or 10 people on a human level, an interaction level. We have to be friends. Number 2, it has to be a creation or a brand that we as co-founders would use ourselves. And number 3, like Nikhil quite rightly said, the legacy, the provenance, the full brand ethos must really be lived and experienced by the company.
Maybe we have time for one last question. Yes, please. We have a hand going up there. The gentleman towards the end. Yeah. Over there, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My query is to basically Mr. Nikhil. I have been following William Penn from the last 5 years. I visited almost all your store in Delhi airport in Gurgaon. And my query is, how do you do the market due diligence before launching any brand or foreign brand in India? Yeah.
So if I was to replay that question, when you decide to enter the Indian market with a particular brand, how do you do the due diligence, the market due diligence for that brand?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Right, so it's rather easy for us. Now we have a network of our stores. We have a team of sales professionals across the country. So it's easy for us to communicate. And of course, we have a large number of consumers. So we do both through consumer surveys, through testing the brand at the stores, and also talk to prospective customers what they think and feel about the brand. So I think, if you want to really look at how, if you really want to bring in a brand, there are multiple methods today.
All right.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot about your own journey. And I think the takeaways that you mentioned about the value consciousness of Indian buyer, but at the same time communicate that well. And from the other side, saying when you're talking about taking the luxury brands, be true to what the brand stands for, And I remember that example that you gave, saying, that craftsmanship is overemphasized in certain brands, which really are not that way. So I think that authenticity clearly stands out. What we are all of us sort of agreed on is that there is a large potential both in India and outside for brands to explore and grow into. And as they say, only sky is the limit. So thank you so much, Rahul and Nikhil, for being here today and sharing your thoughts and journeys with us. Thank you.
A big hand, ladies and gentlemen, for our distinguished speakers. And now, as per our tradition, we'll present mementos to them. I request session moderator, Mr. Sushant Rabra, to please present memento to Mr. Nikhil Rajan, MD William Penn. I request Mr. Rabra to please present the memento, our session moderator to please do the honors, and present the memento to Mr. Nikhil Ranjan, MD William Penn. Please give it up for Mr. Nikhil Ranjan, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, sir. I once again request Mr. Rabra to please present a memento to Mr. Rahul Kapoor, co-founder Excedo Luxuria. And Ms. Payal Gulati to please join us on stage to present the memento to session moderator, Mr. Sushant Rabra. Mr. Sushant Rabra, partner KPMG India. Let's give it up for all the panelists, ladies and gentlemen, for a very effective panel discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Payal. And I now take the opportunity to invite on the dais Mr. Vinay Bhartiya, Senior Vice President, Strategic Partnership, Alibaba.com. Let's all welcome Mr. Vinay Bhartiya on stage, please. Is here to take a keynote presentation on how SME can leverage B2B e-commerce platform for cross-border trade exports. A very warm welcome to you, sir, and over to you.
Sure. Hello.